Hello and welcome to the second installment of the PASS, the Professional Association of SQL Servers Facebook Live Pop-Up Expert Series. In this session, you are going to have the opportunity to ask any of your data, SQL, or technology-related questions. This is real-time live Q&A. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, go ahead and start typing it now in the comment section, and the questions that I'm answering will appear on screen as I roll through it. We love hearing your questions, not just me. I love hearing your questions, but PASS also loves hearing your questions. So go ahead and start asking in the comments. My name, by the way, to introduce myself, is Kendra Little, and I've been a member of PASS for many years and have been a speaker at different PASS events. I've attended lots of different sessions at SQL Saturdays, at the PASS Summit. I've attended pre-cons. I have learned so much as being part of PASS, and I really love sharing what I know as well. I have been a database administrator, a consultant who works with developers, and I currently make online training. So I've worn lots of different hats and am really interested in questions about all sorts of different aspects of SQL Server. So type in those questions into the comments, and I'm really eager to see what you guys are interested in. As the questions pop up on the screen, here's a question. Okay, so what do I need to do before dropping an index? I love working with indexing, and this is one of the areas that used to seem so mysterious to me in SQL Server, and there's still mystery to be had. It's such a complicated area. There's a lot to learn. When it comes to dropping an index in SQL Server, it's a relatively low-risk change, but there's risk for every change. So for example, if you have a query that's hinting an index by name, and you just drop the index, or even if you just rename the index, that query is going to fail because the SQL Server optimizer is like, oh, you told me I had to use this index. That hint saying use this index isn't just like a use it if it's there, it's you have to use it. So you want to check your code base and say, is anything hinting this index? I also like to, before creating or dropping indexes, before changing any indexes, I like to take a look at, are we having things like deadlocks happening on the SQL Server? Because by changing an index, we will change potentially the patterns that queries are taking. And we might have deadlocks show up if we drop an index and change the behavior of a query. And maybe now we're running into a race condition where we have a deadlock. So look for things that are hinting the index. Look for deadlocks. And if it's a super sensitive system, I also like to check what are the queries that are using this index. You can look through either the execution plan cache on the SQL Server, which will tell you recently, has anybody used this index? Or if you have Query Store, you could look in Query Store. If you have a monitoring product that catches execution plans, you could search those execution plans and say what queries are using this index that are going to be impacted, and then make a guess at or test and find out what will they do if I drop this index. So I don't always do that third step. It really depends how sensitive your system is to change, but it can be well worth doing if you're concerned. So yeah, it's a relatively simple operation, but even with dropping an index, there's a lot of work that can be done to make sure that it's safe. All right, so that question cleared out. We've got a new one. A comment from Dave. Hey, I loved your summit presentation. Any way to get the PowerPoint deck regarding partitioning with the dinosaurs? That is a good, I don't think I give that presentation out. Oh, you know what? That presentation is, I think, online. So there are a Best of Past Summit videos that are online. And I think that was actually chosen as one of them. I didn't watch my own that was posted online. There's a bunch of really great ones. Like Aaron Stellato has a fantastic one on Query Store. I'll see if I can dig up the slide deck and put it on one of those sharing sites for that and like link it to that video. So if you actually want to see the deck, so I'll make a note and I'll see if I can do that. But yeah, you can actually watch the presentation online too with that Best of Past Summit Q&A series, and maybe we can get a link to that in the Facebook chat thing too, so people can see all of those videos, because there's actually more on there that I still want to watch that I didn't get a chance to see during the live summit. Oh, there it is. So past summit 2018, best of summit. Yes, sweet. I think Vern Robb has a presentation there on data types I've been meaning to watch. Got a question. I inherited a database with a huge data file. Should I go to the trouble of moving everything into file groups? This is one of the things that, like, when I first started with SQL Server, I was like, oh, what is up with this? Because we can have a database that can have many different files associated with it, and then we can also create file groups. And these can be useful for different reasons, but it isn't always obvious. Like, I ran into one database once where it had been taken to such an extreme that they were creating a file group for every single index. And there were just like hundreds of file groups. And this wasn't helpful either. With SQL Server, you can create lots of file groups and lots of data files. And you only want to create enough that it actually helps you manage the data, back up the data, restore the data, and maybe potentially help you move data files to different storage speeds, right? I might want to have some of my data on really fast SSD storage in a database, and then some of it that's accessed less, maybe I want to have it on slower storage. Sometimes our storage has built-in tiering, and it automatically takes care of that for us. So yes, when you design a database, if you know that the database is going to become large, it is helpful to plan your files and file groups from the beginning. If you inherit a really large database, it can also be useful to move the data into file groups, because you can do things like put read-only data in its own file group, mark the file group as read-only, and limit the amount of backups that you do. If your database gets really large, you can also do things like run CheckDB against a specific file group. And even if you've partitioned a table, you can't run CheckDB against an individual partition. You can run CheckDB against an individual table, but there's not a partition granularity on it at this point, so you can run it against a file group. So yes, I do think when we're getting into the terabytes of data, moving it into non-primary file groups, and each of your file groups may have multiple files. You want to figure out, hey, for my hardware, does having 4 files per file group help me do bulk inserts faster, assuming that's part of your workload. So you want to check, what are the different parts of my workload and what is a good layout for this? And then I would personally start moving data into different file groups, because just having everything in the primary file group is really like literally putting all of your eggs in one basket. And when you get terabytes of eggs, like really, we've got terabytes of eggs in a single basket there. So yes, I do think it's worth the effort. Absolutely. All right, we still got folks coming in. I love it. Ooh, I love this question. Would partitioning help with locking on a highly transactional table? I love it. Yes. Depends how we're talking. There's a couple of different locking issues we can have in a transactional table. One of the questions to think about is, how does data get into this table? One of the things that partitioning can particularly help you do is load really big chunks of data into a table, and then also remove big chunks of data from the table. Like if I don't have partitioning and I just have regular non-clustered indexes and I want to delete a month's worth of data, for example, running deletes against a live highly transactional table, even if I've like carefully crafted my deletes, so I'm like deleting small chunks, not individual rows, but small chunks to optimize transaction log throughput, I'm still going to be doing locking. And more, we often have these analytic queries running against our live transactional tables, so we end up with blocking. Similarly, if I need to bring a bunch of data in a big insert, inserting into a live highly transactional table can cause a lot of blocking too. And using switching with partitioning to say, okay, I'm going to switch out a month's worth of data. If all my indexes are aligned, I can do that. Or switching in a bunch of data. I do need to have a high level lock when I do that. But we have new options in SQL Server where we can say, okay, I'm getting this high lock, but I want to wait at a low priority to try to minimize my blocking. We have some new tools to help with that. That can reduce blocking. with other types of blocking that are simply, if your question is, can just having partition elimination help reduce blocking? Typically, you can do similar things with just clever indexing strategies. So if my issue isn't with loading large chunks of data or removing large chunks of data and I have a blocking problem, partitioning isn't the first thing I would look at. I would look at index tuning. I would look at isolation levels. So a lot of times with partitioning, it's to help me manage the data, manage moving in big chunks, moving out big chunks, arranging huge amounts of data over different file groups so I can run CheckDB against specific file groups, that kind of thing. So it can help with blocking, particularly on load and delete, especially for other blocking problems. Partitioning is partitioning something I think of to help manage really lots of data, typically. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Maybe is the answer, depending on your kind of blocking. Oh, this is so fun. Is there a way to be notified in SQL Server 2017 that auto-tuning is making query plan changes without your knowledge? I don't want to have to check after the fact in DMDB tuning recommendations. Dave, I am with you. I don't want to have to do that either. So for other folks, what Dave is asking about is this feature we have in SQL Server 2017 and Azure SQL Database, where automatic tuning can look at your data collected by Query Store. It's built on top of Query Store. And the automatic tuning is an enterprise feature. Query Store isn't, but it can look at your Query Store data and it can either make suggestions for you and be like, it looks like you've got a regression over there. And yeah, I always imagine it doing it in that voice. Like, it looks like you've got a regression over there. Or if it notices the regression, you can enable it and tell it, go ahead and automatically tune it. Like, if it looks like I have a regression, go ahead and like use the one that's faster. So the question is, I would really like to be notified when there's a suggestion. And I haven't tested this out yet. I was having a conversation on Twitter with Erin Stellato recently, and I was asking her, like, do you know of a way to set up event notifications for this? This wouldn't help you in Azure SQL Database, but on your own SQL Server or on the new managed instance, event notifications are built on Service Broker, so you have to have Service Broker. But I would love to have an event notification when a new suggestion shows up that I can act on. Like, maybe it notifies me, maybe it does, talks to my monitoring system, who knows what it does. Erin and I don't see an event notification that's been set up for this already, but I haven't taken the extra step and tested it out. I've been meaning to get to that. So stay tuned. I would love to do it with event notifications. And if it isn't set up, we should do a feature request in the new Connect, because I agree, like, whether or not it is auto-tuning for you or you're just getting the suggestions, getting a notification on these critical systems would be helpful, because it's basically a notification that something is either needs help or has been helped, but the automatic tuning isn't meant to be a permanent solution. If we have this, because it can get knocked loose, right? Update statistics, maybe we get the slow planning caching in and auto tuning doesn't kick in for a little bit. So we want to know about it. Yeah, so I've been slacking. Let me make a note on the whiteboard. To do event notification for auto tuning. All right. So now hopefully I will actually remember to follow up on that. I hope you like the feature. And if you do like the feature, I'd love to hear about it. Question is, would Flow help? I don't know about Flow. So is that a cloud? I don't know what that means. Maybe. Not sure. All right. Oh, another community question. I saw you do a recent presentation on no-lock, and you spent time talking about how to use no-lock hints. Why would you tell people to use no-lock hints? No-lock hints are one of the more controversial things that I present about, and there are different takes from different experts in the SQL Server community on this. You will see some experts be like, you should never use a no-lock hint. And I think there's something to that. And then you'll have other experts like me who are like, here's when you should use a no-lock hint. And I think we're right too. There is a variety of opinions on this. There's not a lot of people who are like, use them all the time, because they are problematic. So it's a level of, people have a different level of hatred for no-lock hints. I have just found that in my work as a production DBA and in my work at looking at production systems when they're in a time of crisis, sometimes I have needed the ability to say, all right, I know I may not get correct data back from this, but if I cause blocking, and yes, you can still cause blocking when you use a no lock hint. There is a myth. I mean, the name says no lock. It does use some locks. So you have to be careful still, but I have needed to make the lightest touch possible to investigate something. No lock is an option for me, especially depending on the isolation level of the database, especially if there isn't optimistic locking enabled and I need to look at things. No lock can be there for me. So I have just found that it is a tool I need to use. And the important thing to remember is whenever I use a no lock hint, I know that the data coming back to me may just be wrong. And I have to be okay with that. So yeah, I also have had some experiences where folks have said, okay, we just don't care if the data is right for this specific use. And the executive level folks have said, nope, if there's incorrect data in the result, it's fine. We'll sign off on that. And in some of those cases, read uncommitted was the right choice. You do still have to be willing to handle some errors, perhaps that a read failed due to data movement. So there's other baggage that comes along with it. But I have found some cases where, in fact, the data could be garbage. It's kind of a strange thing. I still laugh. I do use the word garbage when I'm describing it. A question about how do I go about learning indexing? I am currently a DBA and our team doesn't do any work with indexes. Another team does this, but I want to learn. And how do I go about getting real experience with it? This is actually a position that I was once in as a database administrator. I was fascinated with indexing, but it was not my job to do the indexing. And the relationship with the team whose job it is to do the indexing, if that relationship isn't awesome, then that can be tricky. Like if you have a collaborative relationship with the team who does the indexes, then you probably wouldn't be asking me this question. Because you'd just be able to hang out with them and like discuss different indexes, right? But that's not always the case. One of the things that you can do to learn indexing is practice writing bad queries, which this may sound easy, but it's not. Writing good bad queries that are slow against a small database is actually really tough. There's more and more sample databases that you can get for free. There's Wide World Importers database. That's a small one from Microsoft. They do have some versions of it that are meant more. There's like an AdventureWorks now for data warehouses. There's Contoso. These are all free sample databases from Microsoft. So you can download these for free. They aren't huge. Even the big ones aren't typically huge. You can download them. You can play with them and start out by not adding any indexes. Just like write a query that's moderately slow. Get used to measuring. Use the statistics IO feature in the execution plans. Get used to measuring. How many reads do you do? How much CPU do you use? Then, once you've got your baseline of your slow query, which may not be super slow, but say, okay, how much can I reduce the logical reads of this by creating indexes? And start testing it out and say, okay, for my test query, how do I create the best index for this and try different ones and compare them? That is absolutely how I would get started. I learned best hands-on. And I really found, especially with indexing, that the more I could create things, try it out, and then sometimes you'll have, hey, why doesn't my query use this index? Okay, solving that problem teaches you a lot about indexes too. When you're using those sample databases as well, it's real easy to post questions about them on different sites around the internet that'll have people help you. That's why even if you have access to real production databases, one of the things that's nice about learning with these sample databases is that you don't have to worry about confidentiality when you post questions about them. And you can ask people, hey, okay, I created this index. Here's my query. I'm using this sample database. Why isn't it using it? And actually get help with that. So I think the sample databases can be really helpful. SQL Server Developer Edition is free. You do not have to pay for Developer Edition. So that can help for sure. Right. This is so much fun. David says, thanks for this. Well, thanks for attending. I'm like, can we do this every week? There's going to be more of these and it won't be me every week, but I'm like, I'm going to definitely show up and ask questions. Question. From Armando, have you seen any problems migrating always on to 2017? Is there any considerations? That is a great question. So one thing, now I personally don't know of any like big picture, this is a problem. Depending on what you're migrating from, of course, you could hit new problem. I don't know if you're migrating from mirroring 2008 to, it could be a smaller change or a bigger change that you're talking about. One really cool thing that I just learned about recently is that the folks at Stack Overflow, they have a full-time DBA now, and she does a lot of her work live because they're crazy. So they'll do things like patch all their availability groups and like have the ability for you to watch it online. And so they're running stuff on these AGs and but you learn a lot about, what are the issues with patching a large availability group and doing the upgrade if you run a very high availability site from watching them. So her Twitter handle is something like Blue Feet. But I don't know of any major issues, but I do think that more and more the ability to find out about these things and be like, okay, what CUs are really people running? Like following people on Twitter is more and more an interesting way to be like up to speed on things like patching availability groups and issues with them. Her name is Taryn, which hopefully I'm saying right, but yeah. I just learned they had that full-time DBA recently, and they have enough availability groups certainly to have a full-time DBA. There are some 2017 issues with Query Store look at the recent cumulative updates carefully. If you're upgrading something with an existing Query Store, there are some issues with that. That's not specific to Always On though. So, yeah. Question here. What are your thoughts? This is from RA. What are your thoughts on the SQL Server 2017 performance on Linux? As I understand, SQL Server using the Win32 API, getting help from SQL Pal to run on Linux. Do you see this causing any performance concerns? There have been some great presentations by Slava Oaks on how they're getting SQL Server to run on Linux. And Slava is one of back when I was early 2005 days and learning about the new SQL OS, Slava Oaks's posts were what I would just read over and over again, trying to comprehend it. He's an amazing guy and been one of my SQL Server team heroes for a while. I am not at the level of understanding how deeply how operating systems work. I'm going to just say that there. A lot of what he talks about in these presentations, which are fascinating, is that a lot of the tricky stuff they had to do, and there's certain statements that they make about what was hard. Some of the tricky, hard stuff they had to do was actually getting debugging to work. Some of the things which sound like they would be really hard, they were like, oh, that wasn't the hardest. But based on what I've seen from those presentations, I am really interested to see the performance benchmarks that people hit with SQL Server on Linux. I have not personally been experimenting and running any of those benchmarks. I am really excited about it simply because I have had clients in the past who, back when I don't do consulting these days, but when I did consulting, I had clients who their SQL Server was the only thing that ran on Windows in their entire environment. They didn't even have a domain for it because it was the only Windows box. So the ability to run it on Linux for these folks who are already using SQL Server and just aren't into Windows, they're used to administering Linux boxes. I'm yeah, I bet they're really super excited about it. And I should actually check in with some of those folks because they did have super high transaction systems. So I don't have any deep info on this, but the talks I've heard by Slava Oaks, and I think he may have some Channel 9 talks online where you can search Slava Oaks SQL on Linux. His talks did make me think, wow, they're going to make this thing screaming fast. But yeah, I don't have deep knowledge to confirm or deny that. Learning to write operating systems is its own thing. I know someone who's doing that. Maybe I'll ask him after this talk. All right, we've got 5 minutes left, and I think I'll try to be brief. Have you done any Sybase IQ to SQL Server migrations? Any gotchas? I have not done Sybase IQ to SQL Server migrations. This question sounds like it would actually, I don't know if you've tried it on the SQL help hashtag before on Twitter, but that's the kind of place where I suspect you might get some traction on there. Probably depends who's currently watching the hashtag, but that's where I would try it to find that out, to see, hey, do you know anyone? And sometimes when I tweet something like that, I'll be like, does anyone do these, or you do know of someone who you can like link me to who has experience in this area, since it's just a specialty. But that's exciting that they're migrating to SQL Server. I love it. All right. Question on becoming a DBA. I'm interested in becoming a DBA, but I'm concerned there won't be jobs in 10 years. Is it smarter to become a developer? I get variations of this question a lot lately, and it is things like these auto-tuning features that kind of bring this up. I would say, like, if you like to code, definitely the more you learn about coding is going to continue to help you in jobs in the future. However, we also have more and more situations where you don't have to be a full-time developer to be able to be to somebody who does something cool. The job title DBA may eventually go away. And to me, this isn't that alarming, because a lot of jobs I had where I was a DBA, my job title wasn't DBA. My job title at one point was software developer in test. When I worked at Microsoft, I was technically an SDET, but my job was actually DBA. I don't think the title is that meaningful, but I do think we're going to have, like, if you're interested in managing data, we're going to still need to have a lot of people who are smart about what's the best way to store my data? What are all the big gotchas I need to know about when using this technology? We're going to still need to have specialists. So I would encourage you, in whatever direction you go in, if you like to code, learn as much coding as you can, because that's a lot like communication is super important in these jobs. And writing code is a form of communication. It's more of a written form of communication, but it's useful. So I do think absolutely follow that path. You don't really have to choose anymore between developer and DBA, though. If you're interested in both, you can be a developer DBA who codes and manages data. And that is very desirable for people to hire. So you don't necessarily have to pick, even if you have one job title. All right, so we are at just 2 minutes left. So thank you so much for folks who've joined and participated in this past live pop-up expert session from the Professional Association of SQL Server. There are going to be more of these pop-up expert events, and I heard the word that coming soon is going to be Paul Turley, who is an awesome speaker and an awesome expert. He's going to be on April 24th. So make sure to catch Paul's event and then look for ones in the future. Bring your questions. You can also look at tweets from past and tweet them your questions before the events. It's going to be tons of fun. If you are not a member of PASS, it is free to sign up for the Professional Association of SQL Server. You can go to pass.org. You can create a profile. You can sign up. You can find out about events that are free in the future where you can learn about SQL Server. You can also volunteer, and maybe someday you'll become a speaker at past events, and maybe you'll be one of the pop-up experts in the future too. We would love to have you join the club. Thanks so much for joining, and it was really fun today. See y'all on the internet soon.